March 1st, 2021. Special meeting of the Board of Education. The time is now 5:00 p.m. and we will begin with a roll call conducted by our Board Secretary, Ms. Sarah Dahlke.
Director Kopp.
Here.
Director Ellis.
Here.
Director Foster.
Present.
Director Broderick.
Here.
Director Vu.
Here.
And Director Allen.
Here.
I'd also like to acknowledge members of our administration as well. Please respond as Sarah calls your name.
Superintendent Gothard.
Here.
Chuck Long, General Counsel. Will Forbes, Assistant General Counsel. Cedric Baker, Chief of Staff.
Here.
Marie Schruel, Chief Financial Officer.
Here.
Jackie Turner, Chief Operations Officer.
Here.
Dave Watkins, Chief of Schools.
Here.
Kate Wilcox Harris, Chief Academic Officer.
Here.
Stacy Grayachea, Director, Office of Research, Evaluation, and Assessment. Kenyatta McCarty, Executive Director of Human Resources. Kevin Burns, Director, Office of Communications.
Here.
Kai Tao, Board Administrator.
Yes, ma'am.
And I am Sarah Dahlke, Board Secretary, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair Foster.
Thank you. To ensure effective discussion via this phone conference, I will be using a roll call procedure to ensure each board member and the superintendent has an opportunity to provide input. If you have questions or comments, please hold them until I call your name. I would like to remind everyone that this is an open meeting and welcome all community members of the public who are monitoring at this time. Also, as a reminder, I ask all board directors and staff on the line to please mute your phone when you are not speaking, just that you would turn off your microphone at the DS. This request also is extended to all others on the line. Next, I'd like to move to approve the order of the main agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. That motion was seconded by Director Vu. Vote, please.
Director Kopp.
Yes.
Director Ellis.
Yes.
Director Foster.
Yes.
Director Broderick.
Yes.
Director Vu.
Yes.
And Director Allen.
Yes.
And that vote was 6-0.
Thank you. That was 6-0 vote, unanimous. Vote. Next, we will move on to the new business item of SPPS Calendar Committee recommendations, and I will turn it over to Superintendent Gothard.
Thank you and good evening, Chair Foster, directors of the board. Tonight, I'd like to share important topics related to our school district calendar that I believe will enhance our ability as a school district to ensure our calendar better supports the needs of our students, families, and staff. I'd like to invite members of the calendar committee to share these recommendations. First, their recommendation for delaying the start of the school year this fall due to the fact that it falls on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Second, eliminating the additional time that is currently built into the calendar for half-day pre-kindergarten student-teacher conferences. Given that our district will only offer full-day pre-kindergarten beginning next year, this time is no longer required. Currently, we have 10 half-day programs. Next year, we will exclusively offer full-day pre-kindergarten programming. This means that all 37 elementary schools with pre-kindergarten programming will have full-day pre-kindergarten programming. And last, the recommendation to begin stakeholder input around observing the religious holiday of Eid. Welcome Certified Sign Language Interpreter and Humboldt educator Sue Snyder, Director Kilgore, and Executive Director Anderson.
Good evening, Chair Foster, members of the board. Remember Ali is here. Sarah, would you bring up our slides to share? Thank you so much. I'm going to start by having Sue Snyder, my co-chair of the calendar committee, introduce the calendar committee.
Thank you, Craig, and good evening, Chair Foster and members of the board and Superintendent Gothard. We have a list right here of our current members on our calendar committee. Craig Anderson and I are co-chairing this committee currently, and you can see we do have one parent representative. We have our principal from Crossroads Elementary, our year-round school, on our committee to help with our year-round calendar, to help us understand that and make sure that we don't miss anything with that. We have other administrative members. We have a couple of educators as well, one elementary and one secondary. And you can see those right there. Thanks.
Great. Next slide, please, Sarah. And Sue and I are going to probably tag team on this. And so I will speak about the first recommendation that we have, and Sue will speak about the second. And because we're going to be full day pre-K at all of our sites next year, and because we built this calendar 3 years ago, and I was not a part of the calendar committee, but they built the calendar based on the idea that we would still have half day pre-K. And so next year we will have full day pre-K, and we will not need the extra conference day for pre-K students. So we're going to add some additional instructional days for our pre-K students next year. And so recommendation number 1 from the calendar committee is to remove the pre-K conference days that were additional, and then add them to the instructional days, and then we will be in parity with all of the full day pre-K and the kindergarten classrooms across the district.
Yes, and our second recommendation, again for this third year of our 3-year calendar. So it's for the school year 2021-22. This year, Rosh Hashanah falls on the first day of school. And to really honor and recognize that that first day of school is very important for educators, as well as for our families and our young people who are in school. We want to make sure that every child has the opportunity to be there on the first day of school, regardless of what their religious observances are. And so we are recommending, after talking with stakeholders, to change the first day of school for the 2021-2022 school year. We're recommending to start the first day of school for grades 1 through 12 on Thursday, September 9th of 2021. And then the first day of school for our pre-K and our kindergartners, we're recommending to move that to Monday, September 13th of 2021. And in with this recommendation is those 2 days that we're moving the start time back from. We're recommending those days to be used for professional development days for staff. That's Tuesday and Wednesday, September 7th and 8th. And as you'll note right on the bottom there of the slide, this recommendation does still leave 3 days above the minimum expectations that the Department of Ed has. Thanks.
All right, I think this is me through the chair. So it's, as Sue mentioned, and perhaps you all have heard too, board members, we've gotten some feedback from stakeholders about specifically that second recommendation about Rosh Hashanah. And so the committee considered the feedback that we'd gathered from Jewish families, from faith and community leaders who reached out to us, and from administration, really especially about pre-K. A particular part of the recommendation that you might not notice necessarily that Sue just talked through is that we are choosing to take to shift our start by 2 days rather than just the single day. And it's true that Rosh Hashanah is an observance that does carry over 2 days for depending on how a particular family and particular congregation observe. But lots of people observe just the first day. However, for the committee, that we're recommending to take the 2 days, in part because our pre-K and kindergarten will start on Monday. And if we only took 1 day, pre-K and kindergartners would start on a Friday. And it's been the calendar committee's longtime practice that we don't have single day school weeks. It's just too hard to have people come for their first day on a Friday and then take the weekend. So that programmatic input was considered as part of the committee's recommendation as well. And as was mentioned before, looking ahead, we are going to spend time here this spring and summer engaging stakeholders to shape some recommendations about other holidays, like Dr. Gothard mentioned, about Eid and other religious observances. So we did do that in the previous 3-year kind of batch of calendars, and we really want to return and dig into that with stakeholders so that we can put forward a calendar that really reflects the beauty of our community. Thank you. Sarah, I think next slide. Is this over to you, Sue and Craig?
Yeah, I'll just jump in right here. Thank you, Heather. Thank you. And we're talking about next steps for committee. We are gonna, as Heather mentioned, we are gonna talk about this next 3-year calendar set that our plan is to present this to you as the board in the fall, so we can get that ready for students and families for our next 3-year set. We are in our second of our 3rd year right now, so next year is our final year of our previous 3-year recommendation. So we are going to make this next recommendation coming forward. And as Heather mentioned, we are going to look into religious observances and what makes sense for our community, our St. Paul Public School community. We're going to talk about e-learning and what does that look like and how can we make that work. And we're going to see if we can make the calendar really reflect as Heather mentioned, the beauty of all of our St. Paul Public School students. And so that is going to be our charge for the next, from now until the fall. And thank you, Sarah, if you can go to the next slide. And Craig, are you going to take this one?
I sure will. I apologize. My computer threw me off and I am now on my phone. So I hope you all can hear me. And the next slide has 2 motions, and they relate to the 2 things that we just talked about. And we're hoping you will entertain those motions, and we can get our pre-K calendar all aligned for next year, and we can get our school year calendar aligned for next year, so that and honestly, we're here at this meeting because we wanted to make sure that families had enough time to plan for the beginning of school and staff had enough time to plan for the beginning of school. And so we bring this to you tonight as a way to preemptively be ready for the next school year and take care of a couple discrepancies we had in the calendar. And the calendar committee continues to work to make sure that all voices are heard and that we're carefully considering each and everything that happens. And yet a 3-year calendar can change in a minute with a pandemic. So appreciate all of you, and hopefully these 2 motions are something you're willing to entertain. And we would open the floor for questions, or you may go straight to the motions. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I'll open it up for questions or comments from board members, beginning with Director Kopp.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to the committee members for their ongoing work. I don't have any questions. I just want to thank the committee for considering the importance of the first days of school. I think we see that now more than ever, the value and kind of why that matters, why those first days of being with community matter, and also aligning for the full day pre-K, which is really exciting. And of course, continuing the conversations about religious observances and how we are showing respect and honoring the differences in our community and going forward. So thank you for your work.
Director Ellis.
I just had a question about how you're getting feedback for the upcoming calendar year input from families, community. I'm not sure how that works or how it's changed or how we're doing some things a little bit different going forward.
Through the chair, co-chairs, I hope it's okay that I jump in here. Director Ellis, we actually haven't designed that yet. I can tell you for the last 3-year cycle that we did, we went real broad and then narrowed it down. So we actually did surveys in our last 3-year batch. We surveyed, I cannot remember off the top of my head exactly how many responses we had, but it was in the tens of thousands. We surveyed students, staff, and families. And I will look here while we present so that I can give you accurate information. And then we went more narrow to really talk specifically to some religious communities and some community leaders specifically about religious observance days. And one of the things that we heard in our last 3-year batch was that families actually didn't have broad knowledge and understanding that their students weren't penalized for taking a religious observance day off, that was an excused absence. And so we worked hard then to make sure that families did know that as a follow-up. You know, it was a situation where we learned that. And so what our stakeholders told us at that time was that they didn't see the need to take off the religious observance days, but rather we're happy to know that the absence was excused. So what I would envision, Director Ellis, is that we will go back in more small group kind of sessions to dig a little bit deeper, ask some more probes about specifically religious observances, because it doesn't feel like we've quite settled on the calendar principles that we all feel most comfortable with. We'll be happy to share the design with you once the committee has worked that through.
And then my other question was the reduction of professional development days. Can you expand on that just a little bit? Is that what I understood? What was that?
Did you say reduction of oh yeah, on the bottom, there's reduction. Sorry, Director.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Director Ellis. The reduction of 2 student days.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, and then replacing those with 2 professional development days for staff. So the days aren't going away for staff people, especially for contract people who are working on contracts with specific numbers of days. The days are still days. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Okay. I wasn't sure I had initially heard it right, so thank you.
Director Broderick.
Yes, I'm ready to support both of these recommendations, but I do have a question because I was glad to hear that the committee is going to be talking seriously about how e-learning days will be affecting next year's and following years, of course, calendar. So could I have somebody from the committee, either Sue or Craig, talk a little bit about what the ideas are about how we are going to incorporate the e-learning days, and maybe even refresh my mind a little bit in terms of what actually takes place during e-learning days. Thank you.
So through the chair, Superintendent Gothard and Director Broderick, Minnesota Department of Education actually has 4 designations of what digital days can look like. And one of those is e-learning days. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But there are also distance learning days, which we know very well from this year. And then there are also digital days that we plan ahead for, and the calendar committee can choose to add those digital days. And we actually did that as a community last year for election day. It was a moot point because we didn't have very many students in school, but we added a digital learning day for election day just so that we weren't crossing too many folks into school. And then the last type of e-learning that the Minnesota Department of Education has is really that full-time distance learning or e-learning or digital learning school. And we have actually, and you approved application for that type of learning too. And so there are 4 ways that e-learning come into our situation, and you will hear more about that a little bit later on. And we're, as a calendar committee, one of the things we're talking about is those e-learning days that could help us, especially on election day, or help us to add professional development to the calendar. And we're considering some of those, and we would always bring those before the board before they happened. But the e-learning days for inclement weather are going to be a separate conversation that we have in a few minutes. If anyone else on the committee has anything else to share, I would appreciate that too. But and did I answer your question, Director Broderick?
Yeah, I, in other words, you're going to maybe go into more detail because I'm a little confused. E-learning days, distance days, digital days. You may be giving me a little too much to handle at one time. But I guess my main question would be, will the committee and the outreach from the committee to parents, students, and teachers be involved in those issues?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
and we come to you, Director Broderick, to get approval for anything that we do when it comes to the calendar and it comes to e-learning days. And so you'll have full information. And honestly, because it's so complex, we want to take it one thing at a time. And so right now we're talking about the change to the calendar for 21-22, and then we'll bring you something separate in a few minutes that has to do with the e-learning days. And the complexity of it is because we want to be clear with you, for you and everyone else. The calendar committee is committing to and requesting these 2 changes, and then we'll discuss the e-learning days a little bit later.
Through the
Okay,
chair.
thank you, Craig, because I'm a great believer in one step at a time. So you just convinced me. All right, I'll be in the words of Ross Perot, all ears from here on today.
Through the chair, I would just like to add that we also approved digital learning days for our 6-8 students who are in a K-8 schedule. So this year, because there was a bit of a kerfluffle last spring, we had to add a few minutes to ensure that we reached our 1,020 hours. And so this year we did see our 6-8 students who are in K-8 settings, like a Capitol Hill, for example. We did you did approve digital learning for that conference day to bring them on par with their middle school peers. Thank you. Director Vu.
Yes, I did have a question. I'd like to hear more about the timeline from when this calendar change was initiated and then came to the board for voting today. I think as we go forward with this kind of work, it's important for members of our community to get an understanding of how long this process can take, who's involved, and what kind of work can be expected.
Through the chair, Director Vu, I'm newer to the calendar committee myself as a newer administrator, and Sue has a little bit more history than I do around how often they meet. But we have ongoing meetings once a month from here on out, and the calendars have been discussed, and then community input asked for, and then we have now been asking for 3 years of calendars in the past 2 cycles. And so I think in the past 6 years, we've asked for a new calendar or new calendar recommendations for 3-year cycles. And I think it really is about helping people plan and be ahead of times and the way that we work. And apparently 4 years ago, when they were planning for that, they did not see that Rosh Hashanah was going to land on the first day of school, and either that was just a foresight, or it wasn't even published yet that would happen. And so in deciding on 3 years in advance, we know that we're going to have things we need to change along the way. And so we appreciate that folks can give input for the 3 years, but we are always open to making the calendar work better for everyone. And Sue, if you'd like to add anything, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, Director Vu, when we're setting the 3-year calendar, we really try to do the deeper dive with our communities, like Heather was referencing. And last time we surveyed our students and our families and our staff. We also visited each of our PACs, all of our different PACs, to talk about, hey, we have a calendar committee, and they weren't aware of that. So to have that conversation with people, and we try to look at everything at a calendar for 3 years so that we can make this plan and the board can approve it, and then families can make plans for that. And one year we tried to change the days for when we're going to do staff grading days to Mondays, and we got a lot of feedback saying that was not very effective for educators. And so then we came to the board the next year to say, hey, could we make an adjustment on this? So sometimes we try things that are new and they don't always work. Sometimes we miss things. For example, here with the Rosh Hashanah, we miss this, that it's the start of the school year. So we do come back and we take feedback from people all year round. As Craig mentioned, we do have monthly meetings. So we are open to feedback anytime. We get questions from people, and they'll go to other people sometimes and come back to us as a committee that we can have conversations then around. Thank you for the question.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Director Vu, was that all?
I think that was all. I think so. My understanding is that there are monthly meetings. The work is ongoing to update a 3-year cycle calendars. However, not all these holidays are sort of seen on the calendars. And then when it comes up, then the ongoing committees sort of function as a way to make changes as needed. So I think that was the answer, if I'm correct, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. But for this particular situation, exactly how long did it take?
Through the chair, Vice Chair Vu, I think I can answer that, at least from the feedback that came into our office. I know that others have heard other feedback too. So we were I first got some feedback from families starting in late December. So right around December 20th was when I got some of the first, mostly emails and a couple of phone calls from families asking us to consider changing the first day of school due to Rosh Hashanah. At that time, I then explained the process that we have this committee that we would be bringing it forward in January to the January committee meeting. And we did. Then, drafted the recommendation in February. We're before you now. So that's been the timeline. I think that principals and other administrators might have heard a little bit before I did in late December, but I don't think it was terribly much longer.
Right. I appreciate that answer. That's all I had.
Thank you. Director Allen?
Yeah, I appreciated that answer too. Get right on it. I appreciate that. And I don't really have any questions, but I do want to say I really do appreciate the fact that you're taking into consideration taking the entire day off rather than just excusing it. And some of the problems that I've seen with just excusing it is some teachers still have test day on that day and they're not willing to excuse that test. I've had a couple of basketball players where Eid fell during tryout week and I was the coach, so I was happy to excuse that. But not all coaches probably are willing to do that because you do have to be really strict when it comes to tryouts, right? And so I'm glad that coming up we are going to start looking at the calendar and taking full consideration to giving the entire day off. I mean, we have 8 years to get to Eid. So before it falls on the first day of school, but it falls on a lot of very important other days. And how do we start the culture so that teachers are not necessarily excusing the test, but giving the test early? Because I had a student who just wanted to take the test early so that they could participate in Hmong New Year, and the teacher wouldn't even let them take it early. So how do we start the conversation and the culture of respecting people's religious beliefs and celebrations? I mean, I hate to keep saying this, but we have 144 languages in our district, so it's going to be really hard. But I think this is taking a good first step. And I'm glad to hear that we're going to keep moving forward with that. So thank you.
Thank you. And I would just add one, my thanks, but two to add to that. As we also talk about a year-round calendar, and I know we've had conversations throughout the last 2 years about this, this making us more aware of what's going on within our communities, but from a school site-based to school site-based, different celebrations and things that are happening in schools. I know we had some conflicts in a couple schools in the past where it's fallen on something as well. And this is just really sparking the conversation about being aware and how we can see the problem, realize it, have these conversations, and adapt so that we are accepting and appreciating all the families in our district and staff as well. And then I just want to clarify, because you think I heard the pre-K, and I think people will say we're taking away those days for conference days. But I just want to reiterate, we're not taking away any days. There will still be conferences for pre-K. They're now going to align with the normal setting. Because of the half-day setting, there were 2 additional days. They're just going to be retooled into a different way for staff development days to support this transition. Is that correct?
Chair Foster, absolutely, that is correct. Half-day pre-K teachers had 40 students and families to conference with, and thus we needed 2 full days to conference with them. And full day pre-K teachers will have 20 students, and so that they can come into parity with the kindergarten classrooms and be able to conference with them efficiently during one day. So it'll be
a much different caseload, and then it'll increase the amount of student contact time and teaching and learning time for pre-K students in those settings. So appreciate the question, and you are correct.
Thank you. Superintendent Gothard, any other remarks?
No comments for me, other than just thank you, Chair Foster, members of the board, and calendar committee. Thank you as well. You know, this is one that many school districts in the metro just weren't on top of. Several of our colleagues have also had to make this modification, and we do this in reaching out with our community. I will share with you, I struggled with this. Not that we're doing this, but I struggled about. I've told our team that this is my 8th year as a superintendent in Minnesota, and every year I hear from families, students, and community members, and especially in the Muslim community, around Eid and some of the other holidays. And I think that because this is on the first day of school, obviously there aren't many changes we can make to our calendar in terms of the first day of school. It only happens once. But I do think that we need to take some time and reflect and again, work with our communities to make sure that we understand how we can work together and honor and celebrate, and also do it in a way where families and young people don't have to balance, you know, things, the duties of school with observing their culture and their religion. So we are going to be looking a little bit greater at ways that we can do that. And I feel very strongly about that, that to me, I didn't want to bring this to you tonight without mentioning that and making sure that our community and our public knew that.
Thank you. With that, I would move to amend all district calendars for the 2021-2022 school year to change the pre-K conference days on 11/18/21 and 3/24/22 to instructional days. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ellis.
Thank you. That motion was seconded by Director Ellis. Vote please. John and Broderick.
Director Cobb,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Director Foster,
Yes.
Director Broderick,
Yes.
Director Vu,
Yes.
and Director Allen.
Yes.
And that vote was 6 yeses, 0 nos.
Motion passes unanimously, 6-0. I would move then to amend all district calendars for the 2021-2022 school year to change the first day of school for grades 1 through 12 to Thursday, 9/9/21. Change the first day of school for grades pre-K, K, and K to Monday, 9/13/21, and change Tuesday, 9/7/21, and Wednesday, 9/8/21 to staff professional development days. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Director Allen.
Seconded by Director Allen. Vote please.
Director Cobb,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Director Foster,
Yes.
Director Broderick,
Yes.
Director Vu,
Yes.
and Director Allen.
Yes.
And that vote was 6 yeses, 0 nos.
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously, 6-0. Next, we will move on to our new business item of SPPS e-learning days, and I'll turn it back over to you, Superintendent Gothard.
All right, thank you, Chair Foster and directors of the board. Now we will dive a little bit deeper into e-learning. So tonight, administration is bringing you a key recommendation that I believe will better support our learners and their families in ensuring continuity of instruction, despite the interruption of an inclement weather day or a snow day. Something I know just a little bit about. In fact, I should share with you that my first year in the great state of Minnesota was the year that our former Governor Dayton had to close all schools in Minnesota and led to, I believe, 6 consecutive days. So learned a lot about the laws and the statutes in Minnesota as it relates to those days. Didn't have this tool in my tool belt at that time, where we did have to, in fact, make changes to the calendar at the end of that year, and also had support from the governor in waiving some of those days. Instruction is our top priority, and the state of Minnesota provides districts with the opportunity to apply for up to 5 days as e-learning days each year. So this isn't unlimited. This is up to 5 days. Across the state of Minnesota, school districts have adopted this practice given the capacity they have established to offer virtual learning due to the pandemic. No longer does a cancellation of school due to the weather or a burst water pipe have to mean students are unable to continue making academic progress. Within SPPS, we have proven we have a viable distance learning plan that meets the needs of students and families and ensures that despite inclement weather, be it heavy snowfall or sub-zero temperatures, our students will be able to log in and continue their learning. I'd like to welcome Executive Director Anderson and Chief Wilcox Harris.
Good evening, Chair Foster, members of the board, Superintendent Gothard, and Ms. Dahlke. I've not done this on my phone before, so I don't know if I can see the presentation or not. Yes, apparently I can. And so I want to be real clear that this is an offering from administration for the 21-22 school year, and it's separate from the calendar committee. And next slide, please. And the current calendar for middle and high school students has 175 days, and that's 5 days beyond the requirement from where we are to what is required by MDE. And so the calendar committee and the motion you just took reduced our number of days for Rosh Hashanah to 173 days. And so next year, we go from having 5 days of cushion or 5 days of possibilities of being absent to 3 days of possibility of being absent. And SPPS has used up to 7 inclement weather days in the past several years ago, and then last year with the pandemic and with the strike and with some other things, we used an increased number of days. And so as a district, it makes sense for us to be willing and ready to have our e-learning days in play for 2021-22. And districts across the state of Minnesota have had those days available and ready to go. They are days that we can use and be ready to use for e-learning when there's inclement weather and or other things that happen to the calendar. And I'll go to the next slide just so I can explain a little bit about where we are. And the red circle is around the e-learning days. And there's earlier on, Director Broderick, I explained there was 4 different ways that we can use digital learning, and the 4 ways are on the slide in front of you. And right now, we're talking about e-learning. And the board can, and we're going to request in a few minutes, sorry about that. I'm getting all kinds of conversations around how I'm appearing. And so in a few minutes, we're going to talk about adding e-learning days to the calendar for the school year 2021-2022. By adding these days to the school year, we don't actually change the school year calendar, and we don't have to use the e-learning days. The e-learning days are a possibility in that if there were a day where we had inclement weather, all the students could have their iPads at home and continue learning from their teacher, basically like we've done in the past few months. And the 5 e-learning days can go unused at the end of the school year, excuse me, except if we were to run into a year where we had 10 inclement weather days, we only have 5 days in the bank, and next year we only have 3 days in the bank, and we would have to make up the remainder of the school days. Next slide, please. And so we are asking the Board of Education to allow us to use the Distance Learning 2.0 plan, where we have students taking their iPads home, teachers posting things on Schoology and Seesaw, and then use that plan for up to 5 days of e-learning to maintain the continuity of learning for students during days when there's inclement weather, or if a school had to be closed for another reason, such as, you know, water main break or some of the things that have happened in the past. And I will open the floor to questions.
Next, I'll open it up for board members, beginning with Director Kopp for questions and comments.
Thank you. So does e-learning days effectively mean no more snow days?
Chair, Director Kopp. So it means that we can, if we're ready, we can have the continuity of learning. And so if that's how you want to phrase it, I would say that that would be the way you can phrase it. But it really makes the district ready to continue learning. If you take the 37,000 students, 38,000 students that we have and take their 6 hours away, it's over 200,000 hours that are lost in one school day of learning. So to me, it's a conversation to be had when we are ready to have digital learning available. We should have digital learning available. And I know that there's nostalgia attached to snow days and those kinds of things, but our job, and from the Office of Teaching and Learning, we're really focused on teaching and learning. So that you're accurate, and yet.
I appreciate that. I was just trying to simplify it down and kind of like what this means, and like, will we have to sit and like, you know, watch the scrolling thing, you know, and they're about to close schools, and then you like, they go to commercial and St. Paul's at the end, and then they come back and they start at A again, and whatever, like nostalgia for that. I won't totally miss that.
Through the chair, Director Kopp, yeah. I will just emphasize one thing that Craig said, which is, or Mr. Anderson said, which is that we don't lose our ability to choose a snow day. It provides the option. Superintendent, I'm sure after lengthy discussion with the board, should he choose to call a snow day, we have that option. What these e-learning days provide is that padding or cushion, so that if in the case of, well, for example, one year in 10-11, we only had, I think we only had 2 inclement weather days, whereas in 18-19 there were 7, and I think you heard mention of that. Then the state had to step in and help forgive those 2 additional days, because most districts have 5. So it's a both and yes, it is heartbreaking to think of that loss. All of us as children ourselves, with children, nieces, you know, rushing and running to the television and all that incredible, teachers too, and principals. However, it just provides the option. It is not guaranteed that we wouldn't have a snow day. We'd have that option.
Oh. And I'm not really a snow person, so I'm not like hoping for those kinds of days. Like I don't do any winter weather things. So one thing I'm wondering, like, I know like our younger learners like are not often bringing their iPads to and from school. So there's that chance, if there is an inclement weather day, that our older students might have their devices with them, but our younger students might not. How will that play into decision making about e-learning?
Through the chair and Director Kopp, we are planning to move to a practice of encouraging all learners to bring home their iPads daily. We started that this summer with allowing students to keep their iPads throughout the summer so they could participate in SPS Connects. And we believe that, and we have started this back with coming back off of our Digital Learning 2.0, encouraging all students to take their iPads home each day and bring them back. So it is going to be a practice and change of behavior. We're constantly reminding. So we're encouraging students to do it just as if they would their backpacks, their pencils, their notepads, bring them back and forth each day. And we actually are, as a district, looking into a different type of bag so that students are carrying their, can keep their iPads safer. We're studying different type of supplies that will encourage students to take their backpacks back and forth.
Great, thank you. Those are my questions. I appreciate the responses.
Thank you, Director Ellis.
Director Kopp hit on one of the questions that I had about the e-learning for our younger students and not having iPads going back and forth, but that's what would happen. But my other question is, the way that I've understood e-learning days, it was more sort of a middle high school focus. Is that shifting throughout the state, or is that the way that it's been, where it has included, you know, K through 12? Because I've only heard of it really as being applied to middle and high school students. And so is that just a statewide shift now?
Through the chair, Director Ellis, I think it's always been through available for any grade that a district asks for it to happen. And I think a lot of times we are running closer to the number of days that are necessary at the high school level. Mm-hmm. However, prior to this year, St. Paul Public Schools wasn't ready to be pre-K-12 e-learning. We didn't send the iPads home with the younger students. Okay. And so now that we've been able to do that, we are able to be pre-K-12 ready to do e-learning. And so in bringing the iPads back and forth and using them as a tool that students use across the district, we are able to offer the idea of an e-learning day for anyone for inclement weather or school closure for whatever reason.
And so then my last question, so in the previous years, we've not used e-learning days. Like they've been there, but we've not really used them, correct?
Through the chair, Director Ellis, absolutely. We have not used e-learning days because you have not authorized us to use e-learning days. And so the board has to authorize e-learning days according to statute. And you have authorized a digital learning day, which was for the day that we had for the election day, and also the 11 hours for the students who are in the 6/8s that are part of the K-8 schedule or K through 6 schedule. And so you have authorized distance learning days. You have not authorized e-learning days. And so this would be the first time St. Paul Public Schools would authorize e-learning days. However, they're very frequent across districts across the state.
Okay, thank you.
And through the chair, Director Ellis and other directors, I think the easiest way to keep it separate in your mind is that e-learning days are unplanned and digital learning days are planned. So that's an easy way to keep them the difference, not a difference.
Thank you. Dr. Broderick.
Thank you, Chief Turner, for that distinction. That makes it very clear. And I think my question, can you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
I think I direct my question to, Superintendent Gothard, because you've become the snow king of St. Paul. Could you tell me a little bit how you think this is going to impact or affect your modus operandi? Because particularly on the day before potential threatening weather, my guess would be is that you would very much like to make the call the afternoon before so that all of our students are alerted to take their devices home, and that all of our teachers are absolutely reminded that they be teaching, if they're, I'm assuming that they will not be expected to go to school, so they're going to be expected to do their teaching instructional duties from home. Well, I've already talked long enough. You know what I'm asking you. How are you going to do it, Superintendent Gothard?
That's correct. Let me share with you just some of the decision making. Then I'd like to have Executive Director Anderson and Chief Wilcox Harris, if they'd like to share more about the teachers and their expectations. You're right. I mean, this is going to be, a lot of this is going to be, what new habits are we going to have to form and routines out of our time, during COVID. And one of them is going to be, as Chief Turner alluded to, having our students more regularly tote their devices back and forth to school. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that this will require, especially in our bad weather months, some extra reminders. And I also know that there are some outliers with our weather. In fact, just a very quick story. When I first interviewed in Minnesota and accepted my first superintendency, we came and visited as a family the end of May. Well, you might remember the end of May 2013, what happened. We had about an 18-inch dumper. So you're not thinking all the time about weather plans that time of year. So to the best of our abilities, using the forecast and the information we get, which by the way has improved dramatically since that statewide shutdown back in 13, I feel as a superintendent and school district, we get a lot of great advanced information, but it's not perfect. So in addition to that, we would have to look very carefully, I think, at, I was trying to think of days where the e-learning plan might not be the best decision that we make when it comes to weather. What if it's the Monday after winter break and no one's really thought of making sure they have their devices at home, or they've thought about the week, we're coming off of a long extended time off school. We may have to make the decision that an e-learning day just isn't possible on that day. We'd have to have a regular snow day. But for the best of our abilities, though, for continuity, I think we would have to have everybody ready to implement an e-learning day, of course, throughout the winter weather months. Kate and Craig, if you have additional comments you want to share about the teacher expectations, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Through the chair, Director Broderick, Superintendent Gothard, the way that it would work is a teacher would be expected to have some asynchronous lessons and things available for students throughout the day on that e-learning day. And some of that can be pre-planned and taken care of ahead of time, and other parts of it might need to be taken care of, in the moment, or calling groups of kids together at a certain point in time, and then they would take care of that through Seesaw or Schoology as far as when they would get together. But the majority of it would be things available for students throughout the day that teachers could keep their learning moving forward, and then they could work on those as needed. And it wouldn't be a full day of synchronous school where you log on when school begins and you log off when school ends. That is in no way the expectation. It's definitely going to be something that we are working together to make work for students and families, but also be that continuation of school and the learning at hand. So it's because it's possible. And we've proven that through this pandemic.
Through the chair, Director Broderick, two other points. The state statute is very clear that we have to ensure there's a clear communication plan for families. It even specifies the number of hours notice that they need to receive. So that's an important aspect. And also, it's also a fiscal decision. So it's a high continuity of instruction decision. ensuring we have adequate minutes, but also being prepared if, because the last time the state returned those 2 days to us, they said, and I believe Marie Schruel was the one that turned me to this phrase, they said never again. They were not going to reimburse again. And it was on us to be sure we were adequately padded for emergencies and padded, cushioned, whatever you want to have those extra minutes. And so to that end, we want to be sure that we're always able to, if you think about the ADM, Marie and her team have described that as around $40 per student per day that the district would not be able to have if we didn't have adequate minutes. And we haven't been there. We figured it out. We figured it out last spring. But this just, again, gives us that flexibility. Teachers have expressed that they really want to ensure that the students, there are students whose families write and say, we don't approve, or for whatever reason, we don't want our iPad to go home with our child. They're not many, but there are a few of them. So there would have to be adjustments, plans made in place for families that don't have the iPads come home, or coincidentally or accidentally don't have iPads come home. One teacher told me that this is Minnesota. We see these weather things coming from far, far away, and yet many times folks are surprised by just how cold and how urgent that call can be to address it. And again, I'm speaking to the superintendent who knows this well. But those are just a few other aspects that help us to make this a sound plan, so that when we do enact it, if we do enact it, folks understand what's happening, what the expectations are, and it's clear to everyone.
I guess I've still got the floor, do I?
You know.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Gothard and Craig and Kate Wilcox-Harris. You seem to be trying to figure, just like I was going to compliment Coach Joe Gothard on coming up with all kinds of little things that might come up in terms of the game plan. And it sounds like you're trying to cover all the bases or all the potential obstacles or problems. The one last question I would have is, will our kids have access to year-round hotspots or online availability at their homes for that entire, well, I guess right now they do, is that correct?
Through the chair, Director Broderick, you are correct.
So in other words, that's not going to be a problem.
Correct. The hotspots. Hello. The hotspots and Comcast internet connections will continue to go through for families who have them. They don't turn off in the summer, and we are right now not expecting to collect those at this time. So they would continue to have access as they do today, and we continue to support them as necessary. Now, again, on a snow day, most of us aren't running around the district, but it gives us time to prepare well ahead of time to planfully be ready for an inclement weather day.
Okay, so then ideally on a what would ordinarily have been the old-fashioned snow day, Superintendent Gothard makes the call, and not only have we done our preparation in terms of reminding and students and teachers that they should be prepared for this thing, because it might happen in Minnesota. And then not only that, they are going to have the availability in terms of connecting up with via hotspots or whatever. God, I'm kind of proud of myself for saying all this technical stuff in an old-fashioned way. But whoever wants to just assure me that it sounds to me like you got a good plan.
Through the chair, Director Broderick, it is part of the routine of making sure iPads are charged, hotspots are charged, Wi-Fi network passwords are known. Those are some new practices we'll have to make sure that we have ready that evening of a potential. So all those times we got the sled out from underneath the deck or the garage, we'll have that ready too. But at the same time, we'll have our hotspots ready and shined up, ready to go.
And are you going to be able to play your bongo drums in case they can't hear you over the internet?
It's a very good thought. I like the thinking.
Thank you, Hans.
Thank you. Director Boo.
I did not have any questions.
Thank you, Director Allen.
I don't have any questions. I'm in support of this because it's good business and I'm all about good business. But it definitely makes me feel like I grew up or something when I'm kind of having kids do schoolwork on snow days. But I'm definitely in support of this.
Thank you. Superintendent Gothard, anything closing?
No, just haven't made a snow day call in quite a while, so this is to be pushed back into this. But we have to be ready, and this gives us just one more application of using the tools that we have. We're so fortunate to be supported by our community in our one-to-one. A question earlier, I think Director Ellis asked it about is this just for younger or for older students? And I do think, Director Ellis, that it did start with a lot of the older students because many districts weren't one-to-one. So they didn't have devices for all their students. But many districts have now gone pre-K through 12, and especially now following the pandemic, but even just before, it had gained a lot of great popularity in our state and in our country for that matter. So I do feel like this is a way that communities are supporting their schools, and the school districts are acting in times of need that we can pivot to this e-learning day. So members of the board, I appreciate your great questions and would like to ask you to please consider the motion.
With that, I move the SPPS will follow the DL 2.0 plan for instruction and use up to 5 days of e-learning to maintain learning continuity for students on days when there is inclement weather. Do I have a second?
Second the motion by Broderick. I beat Ellis.
Thank you. That was second by Director Broderick. Where is it?
It's not competition, Director Broderick.
Vote, please.
Director Cobb,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Director Foster,
Yes.
Director Broderick,
Yes.
Director Vu,
Yes.
and Director Allen.
Yes.
And that vote was 6 yeses, 0 noes.
With a vote of 6-0, motion passes unanimously. Next, we'll move on to some a new business item of student computers, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Gothard.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair Foster, Board Directors. Tonight, as part of our COVID-related budget approvals for GEARS funding, we bring to you a request authorization from administration to approve the purchasing of additional computers for students in the amount not to exceed $350,000. When school districts in the state of Minnesota closed in late March due to COVID-19, March of 2020 that is, we had to deploy laptops to students to address needs of class instruction that goes beyond the scope of an iPad. As we continued throughout this year, we have seen the need for this to grow. Adding these devices will further support student access to high quality instruction. And to share more about this approval tonight, I'd like to welcome Executive Director Hans Ott.
Hello, everybody. I don't have a lot to say. I'm happy to answer your questions. We know that as part of our process to purchase items over $175,000, we come to you for approval, and it's an honor to come and ask you for this approval tonight to support our students to maintain high quality learning in a digital environment. We have been working with teachers and content area leaders across the district to make sure we better understand what kind of devices were students usually going to the computer labs for to engage in learning beyond their iPad. And there are a few types of courses that includes. Some of our career pathways with architecture and design, with like CAD type programs and things like this, and other programming and engineering software. We have that installed on computer labs in the schools. So computer science, some of the advanced coding work, when you get into like AP computer science and advanced work there, you're needing a computational power beyond an iPad. Our Academy of Technology out of Humboldt utilizes some tools that way as well. We have some science lab tools that sometimes require probes to be connected that are designed for computers at this time. And then some of the video production, though we do some great work in iMovie, some of the more premier tools like Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro would be something that would be on a computer device. And Project Lead the Way has some software that's specific to their programming. We also have deployed laptops to our deaf, hard of hearing students who oftentimes need different screen options in order to get closed captioning to work and to have Google Meet views where they can pin their interpreter and see their teacher. And actually we have them using two screens. They have their iPad because they have usually their content on there, and a secondary screen with the laptop. So we've used laptops in various different ways, and we see that need only going to grow, and in anticipation of needs for the remainder of the year and looking into the fall, this purchase will really help us to support high quality learning for all of our students. So currently we're adapting curriculum in our learning environments. We have deployed some laptops, as I've said, out to students. And now with students coming on site, the additional devices we have we are assigning to classrooms or have mobile carts so kids aren't moving down the hall necessarily to a computer lab. The lab comes to them. But we do have some physical desktop labs that this will help augment some of the support for that as well. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions regarding these. And just to note, this is approximately 270 MacBooks with this purchase. I think that was a question that was out there as a wondering. It's about 270 additional MacBooks.
Thank you. Then with that, I'll open it up for questions or comments from board members, beginning with Director Kopp.
Thank you for the information. I don't have any questions. I did just want to, because she was on with the calendar committee, acknowledge that Sue Snyder was a huge advocate back in the spring, right when we went into distance learning for students with hearing differences and their need for laptops. And so I wanted to thank her for her advocacy and for the district for moving on that and for continuing to expand high quality opportunities for our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ellis.
I don't have any questions. I know, shocking, but I don't.
Thank you. Director Broderick.
No, and I'm absolutely happy to see this happen. One quick question, and that is, the funding is coming from, and I always get the different funds, this isn't CARES, this is GOVs, but we're getting some money to help us with this?
Yeah, this is part of the allotment that we get from the GEARS funding.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. We got CARES, we got GEARS, what's GEARS?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of I'm sorry, I don't have the acronym ahead of us. It's Marie, I'll pass it to Chief Schrill to help out here.
Director Broderick, it's the Governor's Emergency Relief Fund.
I thought it was governor. I thought that G was governor. Okay, and God bless him. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Vu.
I didn't have any questions.
Thank you, Director Allen.
I just have one quick question. So are these issued on a semester to semester basis? Because I know some of these classes are just a semester long, or do they just keep it for the duration of the year as their device that they use?
Through the chair, Director Allen, thank you for the question. Yeah, this will be issued to students. It could be for a semester, it could be for a unit of study. Sometimes it's only a portion of a class that really needs a different device, so it will depend on that situation.
And then how do they receive them if it's like that? Because I remember we had to, we check out the carts when it was time to do design and sewing class and stuff. So like, I get that it comes temporarily, but how do they get it and return it?
So there are a couple different options. Some schools, we do have carts that are able to be checked out to students, and we assign everything just like checking out a library book. We check out an electronic device. We use the same inventory system called Destiny. And so that's the student goes in, has it checked out, uses it, and then brings it back. And, we need to look at where the demand and need is so we can assign those devices to buildings. And if it turns out, as we look at virtual learning needs for kiddos in the fall, we are able to assign those from a central location as well.
And so then they're delivered on the bus, like how the iPads were delivered, or how do the students receive the?
So fortunately right now with in-person instruction going on and increasing, we'll be able to assign them from the school and give them to the student. If the student's at home, then yes, it's either the student coming in to the school site to pick them up through a safe curbside type model, or it is using our transportation delivery, or it could be one of our curbside student support sites. We've got 3 options right now available to our kids, and they can use them as necessary.
Got you. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent Goddard, any closing remarks on this section?
No, again, just want to thank the team with getting us ahead so that we're ready for increased demand and we're ready to deploy the tools to our students that they need to be successful. So great job, team, and board, thank you for your consideration tonight.
Thank you. With that, I would move the Board of Education authorize administration to approve the purchasing of additional computers for students in the amount not to exceed $350,000. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. That motion was seconded by Director Ellison. Allen. Vote please.
Director Cobb,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Director Foster,
Yes.
Director Broderick,
Yes.
Director Vu,
Yes.
and Director Allen.
Yes.
And that vote was 6 yeses, 0 nos.
6-0. Motion passes unanimously. Next is the adjournment of the meeting. As a reminder, our next committee of the board meeting will be held on Tuesday, March 9th, 2021, with our regular meeting scheduled for Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. As a reminder, a series of special meetings has been scheduled regarding reopening items for each Monday at 5 p.m. to the end of March 2021. Further information can be found on the board website and public notices page. If canceled, a notification will be sent and posted on the board website. To be added to the notification list, please contact our board secretary. Public comments can be submitted by 1, leaving messages with the board secretary at sarah.dalkey@spps.org or by calling 612-434-1105. That will be compiled and distributed to board members. And or by 2, sending email statements to the Board of Education, email sb.members@spps.org. That'll be compiled and distributed to board members. And 3, by submitting comments online via public comment input form at www.spps.org/BOE. As an update, the subcommittee met on January 11th to discuss the live public comments. Board members approved the recommendation to proceed with virtual live public comment via phone and Microsoft Teams, beginning with the February 23rd regular meeting. Members of the public may register for public comment by 1, contacting our board secretary, and 2, submitting the public comment input form at the www.spps.org/BOE form. The format for live virtual public comment will be similar to the Truth and Taxations hearing format. Speakers will be provided a Microsoft Teams link to join via their computer and or phone number to call in to join the meeting. Public comments begin at 5:30. Check something here. At this time, then, I would motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second. Ellis.
Thank you. That motion, y'all didn't jump to that one. That motion was seconded by Director Ellis. Vote please.
Director Cobb,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Director Foster,
Yes.
Director Broderick,
Thank you, Director Alice. Yes.
Director Vu,
Yes.
and Director Allen.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's see. I gotta get my time going here.
Oh, I'm sorry. That vote was 6 yeses, 0 nos.
Thank you. With a 6-0 vote, motion is unanimous. The time is now 6:19 p.m. We are adjourned. Thank you all for your time, talent, and resources. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.